Welcome to Quick Book Club. Today, we are diving into a book called Super Thinking, and we're going to give your mind a serious upgrade. Think of it like this. We're not just learning new things. We're actually installing brand new software in your brain. Software for making better decisions and solving problems like never before. So let's open up that mental toolkit.
All right, let me ask you something. Have you ever looked back at a decision you made and just cringed? Thinking, what on earth was I thinking? Maybe you bought something on impulse that's now just gathering dust, or you made a snap judgment about someone that turned out to be totally off base, yeah? Well, if you've been there, you're not alone. That feeling, it's usually your brain doing exactly what it's built to do, taking a shortcut.
See, our brains are absolute masters of efficiency. They have to be to get us through the day. So they create these little mental shortcuts to save energy. And, most of the time, they work great. But in the world we live in now, which is super complex and full of big decisions, that wiring for speed can sometimes get in the way of being accurate. These shortcuts can turn into mental traps. But here's the good news. We can learn to build a much better system.
So, here's our plan for today. We're going to build out a brand new mental toolkit with 4 incredibly powerful models. We'll kick things off with something called inversion, then jump into probabilistic thinking. After that, we'll get into the simple genius of Occam's razor and finish up with the powerful test of falsifiability. Let's get started with our very first tool.
First up is a tool that I think is a total game changer. It's kind of like a secret weapon for problem solving, and it's called inversion. This one feels a little backward at first, but trust me, it can completely change how you look at pretty much any challenge you face.
So, what in the world is inversion? Well, it's this really simple but brilliant idea of just flipping the problem on its head. So instead of asking, how do I succeed, you ask the complete opposite. What are all the ways I could fail? For a minute, you stop chasing the goal. Instead, you start actively dodging all the things that could go wrong. It's like before you set sail, you first map out all the hidden rocks and dangerous currents.
A really great way to think about it is like putting your socks on inside out. It feels a little weird, right? But it gives you a totally new perspective on the same old sock. You're not changing the goal, you still want warm feet, but by coming at it from this weird opposite direction, you might notice something you missed before, like a really annoying seam that would have bothered you all day.
Let's get practical with this. Okay, imagine you're planning a picnic. Your first thought is probably, what delicious food should we bring? But if you invert it, you ask, what could completely ruin this picnic? And bam, your brain starts listing things. A sudden rainstorm, an army of ants, lukewarm drinks. So now you're way smarter. You pack an umbrella, some bug spray, and an ice chest. Or hey, what about that bike you're saving up for? Instead of just thinking about the goal, flip it. What's stopping me from saving? And you might realize, oh, it's that expensive coffee I buy every morning, or that subscription I literally never use. Once you see the obstacles, you can start knocking them down.
So the big takeaway here is that inversion isn't about being negative or pessimistic. Not at all. It's about being smart and strategic. It's like preventative care for your plans. When you figure out what could go wrong ahead of time, you can build plans that aren't just hopeful, they're tough and ready for anything.
Okay, let's grab our next tool. We've gone from preventing failure to getting way better at predicting success. And this one is all about learning to think in probabilities.
Now, probabilistic thinking sounds super complicated, but it's really not. It's just the idea of using logic and maybe some simple numbers to guess how likely something is to happen, instead of just going with your gut feeling. It's about upgrading your thinking from, I feel like this is a good idea, to something more like, okay, based on what we know, there's probably a 70% chance this will work out. You're swapping vague feelings for smarter odds.
Honestly, it's kind of like having a crystal ball. But this crystal ball is powered by data and reason, not by magic. So instead of staring into some spooky orb, you're just looking at the facts, the patterns, the history of what's happened before. It helps you see all the different ways the future could go, and more importantly, which ways are more likely.
Just think about rolling a regular 6-sided die. You already know, without even thinking hard, that your chance of rolling a 4 is 1 in 6. It's not magic. You wouldn't bet your house on rolling a 4, right? Of course not, because you get the probability. Well, this mental model is all about taking that same clear thinking and using it for the bigger, messier decisions in your life.
So how do we actually do this? Well, there are 4 key steps. Number 1, you've got to try and ditch raw emotion. So if you're thinking about investing in a company, don't just go with your feeling that their product is cool. Look at the actual numbers. 2, weigh your options by looking at the likely outcomes. So if you're choosing between two jobs, think beyond just the salary. What's the probability you'll get promoted? What's the chance of having a good work-life balance? 3, you have to get comfortable with uncertainty. Life's not a sure thing. So if there's a 30% chance of rain, a good probabilistic thinker has a backup plan for that picnic. And finally, number 4, stay humble. Your predictions won't be perfect. The goal is just to get better by being open to new information and updating your beliefs when the facts change.
All right, our third tool is one of my all-time favorites. It's an amazing principle for anyone who's ever just felt totally overwhelmed by a complicated problem. It's called Occam's razor, and it is your new best friend for cutting right through the confusion.
The idea itself is so simple, it's beautiful. It basically says that if you have a bunch of different explanations for something, the one that requires the fewest crazy assumptions, the simplest one, is probably the right one. It doesn't mean the simple answer is always right, but it's almost always the best place to start looking.
Yeah, just picture a magic razor in your mind, and its whole job is to just shave away all the complicated, unnecessary layers of a problem to get to the simple truth. You've probably heard the saying, when you hear hoofbeats, think of horses, not zebras. That's Occam's razor. The razor helps you shave away the crazy zebra idea until you've checked for the much more common horse.
Let me give you the perfect everyday example. Your car won't start. Your brain could immediately jump to these huge, scary, expensive conclusions. The engine has failed. The computer has a major bug. But Occam's razor says, whoa, hold on. What are the simplest possible explanations? Well, maybe you're just out of gas. Or maybe the battery is dead. Or maybe a cable is just loose. You always check the simple stuff first before you start panicking and calling a tow truck.
At the end of the day, this is just a powerful reminder to fight that urge to overcomplicate things. Our brains love to spin these wild, complex stories when a much simpler explanation is usually right there in front of us. So whenever you're trying to figure something out, always start with the most straightforward path first.
And that brings us to our fourth and final tool. Now, this one is basically the foundation of all science, but it's also an amazing model for your everyday life. It's called falsifiability, and it's basically your own personal built-in lie detector.
Okay, the word sounds kind of academic, I know, but the idea is super practical. It just means that for any claim to be taken seriously, there has to be some way you could test it and prove it wrong. If you can't even imagine an experiment or a piece of evidence that could prove an idea false, then that idea isn't really a solid theory. It's more like an article of faith.
This tool is so important because it's the perfect weapon against one of our biggest mental flaws, confirmation bias. You know what I'm talking about. That tendency we all have to look for and believe information that already confirms what we think. Falsifiability makes you ask a much harder but much better question. What would have to happen for me to change my mind about this? It's all about putting your own beliefs to the test because only the strongest ideas survive that kind of challenge.
Let's put this into practice. So, say someone claims chocolate cures the common cold. The easy thing to do is just find stories from people who ate chocolate and felt better. That's confirmation bias. The falsifiable approach is to design a real scientific study that could actually prove the claim is false. Or a big question, like, do aliens exist? It's easy to just collect cool UFO stories, but a falsifiable mindset also has to consider the fact that there's a total lack of hard, scientific proof. This model makes you demand real, testable evidence for any big claim.
And really, it all comes down to this one powerful sentence. This is one to remember. If an idea is built in a way that nothing could ever prove it wrong, then you can't really prove it right either. Real strength, real truth, comes from an idea that has been tested against reality and actually survived. And there you have it. We've just walked through 4 incredibly powerful mental models. So now, let's put them all together into your new, ready-to-use toolkit.
Here it is, your Super Thinker's Toolkit. First, think backwards with inversion to see problems in a whole new light and avoid failure. Second, assess the odds with probabilistic thinking to make way smarter decisions. Third, find the simple path with Occam's razor to cut through all the noise and confusion. And fourth, test everything with falsifiability so you know what's real. These aren't just abstract ideas. They are real tools you can start using today.
And that brings us to the final question, and this one is for you. You now have these tools. You have the reverse thinking of inversion, the crystal ball of probability, the simplifying razor of Occam, and the truth detector of falsifiability. So, what's the first problem, the first decision, the first big question you're going to tackle with your new super-powered thinking? Thanks so much for joining us at QuickBook Club.